Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil on the show. It's a Thursday morning. We typically don't record on Thursdays, but some news happened Tuesday night and then became official Thursday morning, and we felt like we've got to talk about it. It's going to be a quick one from Erik and I, but Erik, Dan Lanning, his contract extension with the University of Oregon has been agreed upon, has been approved, and now has been signed, and it was done, but officially now announced as well. The University of Oregon, literally as we were hopping on this podcast to talk about the Board of Trustees approving the deal, have sent out a release announcing it with quotes from Oregon Athletic Director Rob Mullins as well as Dan Lanning. Erik, it's essentially a 6-year new deal. They bumped his pay up to $7 million starting this season, and it will increase by $200,000 every season. If he wins 10 games at any point during the season, he gets an additional year added on to his contract for up to 3 additional extra years.
Yep.
And if he wins a national championship at any point during this contract, his salary will see an immediate $500,000 increase that following year. And for every remaining year beyond that, it will increase as well by $500,000. In total, even if you just eliminate the national championship part, Dan Lanning's contract could essentially be 9 years, over $70 million. This is a massive commitment from Oregon to Dan Lanning. And then I think all of these numbers, Erik, are huge, but the buyout is the biggest storyline of this entire deal for both sides.
Yeah, buyout is $20 million. And really quick, just to tie the bow on it, the contract, I guess in disregarding the possibility, as Matt said, I think probably pretty likely that happens, but those extra years getting added on, it's a base deal that is $45 million over 6 years, which is pretty darn competitive, as Rob Mullins said on his remarks to the Board of Trustees before they voted to approve it. Puts him at number 2 amongst Pac-12 coaches. Lincoln Riley makes over $10 million, and then he said approximately 15th nationally, with about $7 million a year. Not bad. It's a nice piece of work for Dan. And then
it's a good job if you can get it.
Yeah. And to your point, $20 million buyout has been agreed upon. And just to give some context, I was just looking at the original deal that he signed last year. If he were to have left before the end of, or I should say, basically in the next calendar year, like let's say he takes off to leave to go to wherever else. Previously, that would have been a $10 million buyout. Now it's 20, and that number was set to descend over the course of the contract to where you get to the 5th year. This is the previous contract. You get to the 5th year, it was only going to be $1 million. So it's pretty clear here. And Rob, I thought, did a good job of communicating. I'll just read a quote he gave about the buyout, because I'm with you, Matt. Like, aside from just the fact that he's getting almost $2.5 million more base salary per year, the buyout's the big part here. And here's what Rob Mullins had to say to the Board of Trustees. He said, "It's a mutual commitment. Coach Lanning and his family love being a part of this community. Obviously, they put down roots and they've engaged at a level we haven't seen since probably the Brooks Bellotti era. So it's something that is extremely important to our community. And Dan, Sophia, and the kids have made that kind of commitment. It shows that this is a two-way commitment, which is important to us." I thought it was kind of interesting. He threw out that this is the best commitment they've had basically since Brooks and Bellotti. That didn't move past me quickly. I was kind of, that's sort of telling a little bit in terms of the people that Rob has worked with to this point.
Yeah, Rob is very much Rob Mullins, Oregon's athletic director. He's not someone to he's not a hype man. He's not a showbiz type person. And so when he does give the rare interview, he basically speaks in facts, and is very strong with what he says. And so when he said that I raised my eyebrows too. Like that was a whoa, Oregon's committed to this. And they feel very much in tune with what their head coach's committed level is for the university. And we've talked about this off the air, you and I. Like, this is a big commitment by both sides. Mm-hmm. Oregon is throwing a lot of money at a coach who has 1 year of experience as a head coach. They did win 10 games last season. They did lose to their two rivals last season. Mm-hmm. He has a losing record against top 25 opponents, which is true, but he also won like 8 or 9 games in a row during that season. They only lost to Washington and Oregon State, I think, by like a combined 9 points or something. So they are all in on a very young 1 year head football coach, paying him top 15 level in the country, number 2 in the conference, according to the U of O to public data. And then I think Chip Kelly is the highest, I think.
No, it's Lincoln Riley. I just looked it up. Lincoln Riley
Lincoln Riley is not public.
Well, I'm just going off of the I think the number he's using is probably what I saw, because Chip Kelly's number was less than that. So Lincoln Riley is estimated at 10.5 according to the story I just read. So gotcha. I don't know. You're right. USC and Stanford don't make theirs a public. I know you're right. You're right on that.
And then Lanning himself, though, like we've always gotten the vibe from him that he's tried to make it really well known that he's all in at Oregon. He's committed. He's talked about that in his press conference. He's talked, multiple times throughout the year, just how much they love being in Eugene, and him and his family. And I think this is a sign that he's all in right now at the University of Oregon. Now, like $20 million, yes, some conglomerate booster group could come in and could pay that. But
sure.
It's a number, though, that will give every school who's going to go after Dan Lanning, they will pause for a second and go, whoa, do we really want to go down this rabbit hole and pay $20 million just to get Dan Lanning, and then probably have to pay $70, $80 million to pay Dan Lanning, and then probably pay another $20 million or $15 million in terms of buyouts and assistant coach contracts for, at this new school. There will be schools that could afford that, but it will make every school basically go, whoa, do we really want to go down this path and try and get Dan Lanning, because he is entrenched at Oregon. And the great thing about it, you mentioned it, how it goes down to essentially zero in his old deal. He could be on year 7 of his current contract and be going into that bowl game and get a new job, and he still has to pay Oregon $20 million. The only way he owes zero money to the University of Oregon is if he lets his entire contract
lapse.
That's the only way he gets out of a buyout. Now, Oregon, on the flip side, fully guaranteed deal. So if Dan Lanning doesn't work out I don't think it would ever get to this point, but if he posts back-to-back losing seasons in year 4 and year 5, and let's say year 2 and year 3, he won 10 games, so he still has 4 more years left of his deal, you got to pay all 4 of those years if you want to get out of Dan Lanning. It's a big commitment from both sides.
A couple more thoughts on the buyout. It's $100 million basically commitment, to your point. If a school says that's the guy we want to be the next coach, which again is not a number that is unreachable by, like, I don't know, SEC schools, Big Ten school standards. Like, they could possibly figure it out, but it's going to be extremely expensive. And then the other part is, if you're Oregon, you're getting $20 million back, which could be really significant in whatever you choose to do. Again, we're talking way down the line hypothetically. We both hope, and I think Oregon and Dan clearly are under the expectation that this buyout won't matter because it won't come into play because Dan will coach through the extent of the deal. But it would be, if hypothetically that did happen, there'd be a lot of money headed back towards Oregon that would help with whatever else they're trying to do going forward in terms of finding their own replacement coach. I thought another thing that really stood out, and I know Matt, it stood out to you because we've talked about it off air, was just this opening kind of comment from the athletic director here. And I'll just read it. He says, "Today's request for a contract extension for Coach Lanning is the first part of a bold vision to ensure that Oregon football and Oregon athletics remain competitive at the highest level of college athletics into the future." The first part of a bold vision. I don't know. What'd you think of that, Matt? Because I guess I'm just curious on what's to come. And the other part I should note, just to add upon this, is that he also later was asked if this was like all philanthropic in terms of where the money came from, and he said that's correct. And but then he also said the increase in contract is supported by philanthropy. And as I mentioned, as we look forward to some other things as well. So there's clearly some financial element to that vision, and I'm very curious to see what this looks like going forward.
Yeah, that raised my eyebrow, like you said. There's obviously the elephant in the room. I'm sure a lot of people are hoping we touch on this, is Colorado's impending departure from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. It hasn't been officially announced as of 11:01 Thursday morning on July 27th when we're recording this podcast. But that's what the expected news will be today. John Canzano has reported that the Pac-12 and the ADs of the remaining 9 schools now, should Colorado depart, are going to be meeting this afternoon via video teleconference to discuss expansion and other things. We'll see what happens there. Yeah. So maybe it's tied into that. Maybe Rob Mullins at Oregon knows some things are happening and it's going to be positive. I don't know. Maybe he's referencing the new indoor facility that they're building at Oregon. That's, already in the works. It's already been announced. They've gotten the land approval swap rights. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, not to cut you off, Matt, but like he says, this is the first part of a bold vision. And as you said, they've already approved that stuff. So it seems like this could be, I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's what it is.
So it's interesting. I mean, look, we don't know this and we're going to speculate. Maybe it's not right for us to speculate here, but maybe this is Phil Knight saying, I'm going all in. I've already been all in, but now I'm literally pushing all my chips in. I'm going to the ATM and getting a couple extra mil and bringing it back to the blackjack table to double down on my 11 that I face right now. Maybe he's all in because I think that's where this money came from.
Yes.
I think when Rob Mullins says it's donated, philanthropy. I can't say that word.
Philanthropically.
Yes. That's where that money came from.
Sure,
in some way, shape, or form. Phil has donated in some capacity. Maybe it's not all of it. I would be really surprised if Phil donated 0 cents to this raise. But maybe Phil's got some crazy plans of, in his twilight years, he's just going to pump Oregon with millions and millions of cash, which would be kind of fun to see. I mean, because there's this perception that that's what's already happened. And yes, he's donated over $1 billion or something like that to the University of Oregon, but it's not just athletics. It's a wide range. He's donated more academically than he has athletically, I think, to Oregon and Stanford academically. But there's this perception that he's donated all of it athletically. Maybe we finally arrived at that time where Phil Knight is just like, blank check, here you go. I want everything athletics at the top notch. I don't know. I mean, what could it be? Like, is it rendering Autzen State the other side of Autzen Stadium and getting that up to code? But like, they can't sell out Autzen. People aren't going to games. It's not an Oregon issue. It's a phenomenon across all sports at all levels. Like, it's very rare to have consecutive sellout streaks. Like, so they're not adding seats. Maybe it's adding more club seats or type things. I don't know.
Is that really a bold? I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, we're maybe spending too much time on that. I just think it's important interesting because Rob brought up twice that this was like there were more things to come, and I don't know. As Matt suggested, that was the other thing I thought of. Could it be the new practice facility? But that's already something that's already been established. So that wouldn't be the first part of a new vision. To Matt's point, doing some work on Autzen. maybe. But from a facilities perspective, Oregon is already so far, like, so forward thinking, and pretty much everything's top notch. I just don't know if that's what it is. So I'm completely kind of clueless here. And I guess the really conspiracy theory, again, total speculation, is like, could he be somehow buying Oregon their way into a conference or something like that? Because I mean, I have no idea. But I also think, like, if you're Oregon, not to, and again, I don't know how much we want to get into the conference realignment thing, but like, this seems like an awfully large commitment to make to your coach if you think the conference you're in and you're going to be in is like going to be not relevant soon, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that Oregon would just completely cut bait and be like, I take our coach, our program's not going to mean anything, we're not going to be in a big conference. But this seems like a operating from a place of confidence, which I think, at least from the outside looking in, is sort of interesting, considering that the Pac-12, at least without Colorado, I guess now it's the Pac-9, doesn't look like it's operating from a place of power. There's still no media rights deal done. It seems likely at this point that other schools end up following Colorado to the Big 12. So I'm not sure what it is, but we will hopefully have something to reference when we learn the second part of this bold vision at some point, and then we can.
Is it conference expansion? Maybe. I mean, we've got the Buckeye in Austin Stadium. We've got Brutus taking the photo with the duck.
The joke I was going to make is, like, Phil has a lot of money. He could just buy Fox and then just own the network and then be like, yeah, Oregon's going to be in this conference. I've just purchased it. That's outlandish and not reasonable. I think financially he probably has enough money to do it, but it would probably pretty much end, and he would lose his incredible generational wealth to make that purchase while still owning the company, though. So maybe it wouldn't be that. I don't know. That's obviously not probably what it is, but it's really interesting. I'll put it that way.
Very obvious comments by Rob Mullins. And like Eric said, we really hope to find out what that means down the road. But to wrap things up here, I think this is probably, we're going to come off as, I'm at least going to come off as, a super homer, but this is a win-win for everybody. And I think this is a very strong play by Oregon. They've been burned at the stake a couple times with Mario Cristobal, leaving to go home, Willie Taggart to go and take what he called his dream job school. The Helfrich job didn't last, and they've found someone that appears to be all in on the community. And like Mullins said, like, Lanning and his family have thrown themselves into this community as quickly and as strongly as any other coach I can remember. And it's true, truly like the Bellotti years, where we grew up going to school with his kids, playing sports or competing against his kids. Like, you would see them out and about town. You never saw Mario Cristobal out and about town. Willie Taggart wasn't here long enough to be seen out and about town. Like, you bump into Lanning and he's out and about, he's doing things. And I think this is a sign. This is one of the things that Oregon gets negative recruited at. Oh, your coach is going to leave when an SEC school calls, or he's not from here, he's going to be gone. Or it's, you can't keep this type of a head coach even if he wants to be here, because the money that the other conferences are going to have is going to dwarf in comparison, and you won't be able to keep him because you won't be able to afford the extension that he's worth when a middle tier Big Ten or a middle tier SEC school comes calling because they have an opening. This eliminates all of that. All those negative talking points are basically gone.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. I think somebody on the call even referenced that, like, Oregon's had a difficult history with coaching retention, and obviously didn't point to Mario or Willie, or, I mean, you could even throw, it's a long time ago, but Chip Kelly left on his own accord, even though it sounded like there might be stuff from the NCAA following that made it difficult for him to still be employed by the university. But yeah, no, I think it's pretty clear that this is a long-term commitment. And to your point, Matt, like, there are only going to be probably now, I don't know, a dozen, 24 schools that confidently can say they want to spend that much money on a head football coach going forward. And it'll have to be one of those coaches one of those programs who will have to, who has the financial ability to really even consider bringing on somebody at that number. So that's big, as to your point, for recruiting. Like, Oregon has been negatively recruited for years for the fact that their last two head football coaches left to go to Florida after not being at the university very long. This is, I think, a sign of. I also like to give Dan some credit here. I think he's aware of that history too, and signing this and agreeing to that buyout. I think he's trying to do his best to convey that, not just from a recruiting perspective, but hopefully to the community, to say like, hey, we're here for the long haul. And I know it's been tough for the last. I mean, I was thinking about it not too long ago. Like it's been like 2 decades since a coach has been here, more than 4 years. Like that's just hasn't been a thing that's happened. And if this contract, if it runs through its duration with Lanning still here, he'd be the longest tenured head coach at Oregon since Mike Bellotti. And so, I mean, that in and of itself provides some stability that the program hasn't had. And like that's one of the, I think, remarkable thing about the continued success that the program has had over the last 15 or so years is that they've had so many different head coaches come through here and they've still maintained success. Imagine what it might look like when they have the same head coach with the same vision for 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, 15 years. So, I mean, obviously that's way down the line. Who knows what happens, but that could be a huge benefit to the program to have some stability at that position for the long term.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Odds and Audibles podcast. Next time you hear from us on the show will be a very, 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 very rare Sunday recording this week. We're going to have a special guest on that podcast as well, but with Erik and I, breaking down some Oregon football recruiting. That's a little tease for you there. And then, hey, next week, fall camp, it's here. It's arrived. We're right there. But until then, you've been listening to the Odds and Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.